Throughout history, freethinkers have outraged the religious with their wacky ideas about the virtues of free speech, reason, and of course, eating babies. Now, God is dying, and it's time to dispose of his remains. From the pits of hell, Satan sends two puppets of the imperialist West and the Zionist Jews against God, Islam, and tiny kittens to bring you their propaganda and conspire for a new world order. This is Secular Jihadists for a Muslim Enlightenment with Ali Rizvi and Arman Navabi.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Secular Jihadists for a Muslim Enlightenment. My name is Ali Rizvi, and I am Arman's not here today. He's not joining this, but he will be here for the next episode. And today I've really been looking forward to this episode because I'm here with someone who I consider a hero. I don't mean to embarrass you, House, but I just want to quickly introduce you so that people know who they're going to be hearing from today. My guest today, our guest today, actually on Secular Jihadists, is Aus. Aus is a refugee from Iraq. He's an ex-Muslim, and he is also an Lgbtq plus activist. He is the founder and the co-director of 3 humanitarian projects. The first one is the Amman Project. Is it Amman or Amman?
Amman, yeah.
Amman,
in Arabic,
yeah.
Safety, yes.
Great. So it's the Amman Project where he focuses on. This organization focuses on supporting LGBTQ refugees in Turkey. Yeah, the organizations in Turkey, and they also advocate for LGBTQ rights in the MENA region, that's the Middle East and North Africa region. Right now, they are very squarely focused on supporting the LGBTQ plus community in Afghanistan. He is also the founder and co-director of United Hands for Refugees, and this is a pandemic-related, it's a relief initiative to help support the most vulnerable people in the refugee community with food and hygiene projects, and then the third organization is the De-Authorized Dialogue Project. So this is something that I know that it's a concept that we here at Secular Jihadists believe very strongly in as well, where they aim to build meaningful collaborations between refugees in the Middle East and the West to promote understanding and combat hate and xenophobia. So what we're going to talk about today, I just really want to, Aus has been recently covered by CNN. There's been articles about the LGBTQ plus community in Afghanistan and what they're going through, especially with the recent Taliban takeover. They're in a life or death situation. It's a very, very dire issue. And we are going to get into that. We're also going to get into some of the other work. So Aus, welcome to the podcast. It's just wonderful to have you here and talk to you.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you so much for having me. I've been a fan of your work for a while, and I've been following what you do. So I'm excited.
It's completely mutual. So I just wanted to know. This is I have heard of you before, but I really want people to know who you are. So you are you were born in Baghdad. You grew up in Iraq partially. So just to tell us about what happened, how you grew up, and how you ended up in the line of work that you're doing right now.
Yeah, I was born in Baghdad to a Iraqi father and a Palestinian mother, and I grew up during the sanctions on Iraq, and I was 11 when the war started, the 2003 war, and I basically woke up and started to think and learn things while the war was happening around me, and all the secular violence and the killings and the bombings and I was actually I grew up and I was raised in a majority Sunni neighborhood, and my father is Shia. So I had a before the war I had a normal childhood, I would say, like birthday parties and school trips and and going out with friends and going with my mom and dad and sister to like dinners, and it was like anything, any childhood you can think of, probably. But when the war started, like I mentioned, my father is Shia, so uh, shortly uh, after the war, the Shia people in our neighborhood were targeted. So they were, my teacher was killed, my barber was killed, a lot of our neighbors were killed. Some of them I've seen in my own eyes, because we were playing football in the streets, and things, bombs would explode. And one time I saw it in front of my school and in front of my house, and just life changed. And it came down to us and one other family in the neighborhood. All the Shias left, but because we were raised and in this neighborhood and have been living there for years, we didn't want to leave. But a group came to the last house, the Shia man, other than my father, and they went up to his room and kidnapped him, put him in the back of the trunk, and he was found dead just an hour later.
Your father?
So no, that was the neighbor who was the last Shia man in the neighborhood. So my father had to flee immediately, and we fled after a few days, and we went to like a more modern, diverse neighborhood, or at least we thought it is. But the Shia militias were influential in that neighborhood, and so my mother, being a Palestinian Sunni with no scarf on and speaks with a different dialect, they didn't like the fact that she was there. They thought she's an outsider, a threat, and the militias basically fabricated a story about how my mother kidnapped children and keep them in our house. So I woke up one day, I remember I was 15, 16, and there was like 30 policemen and army men in my apartment there to arrest my mom.
So wait, I was
Yeah,
so
yeah.
so you're in this situation where your father is Iraqi Shia and your mother is
Mm-hmm.
Palestinian Sunni, and they
Mm-hmm.
are from different sects, and they are now caught up between a sectarian sort of civil war where the Sunnis and Shias are fighting among each other, and they are so. I mean, that's actually pretty intense.
Yeah, we weren't safe. Like wherever we go, we were in a Shia neighborhood, we were in a Sunni neighborhood, we were not safe. We go to a Shia neighborhood,
Yeah.
we were not safe. And so we had to, after 50 days, because a judge cleared my mother of any wrongdoing, because it was obviously, like, after looking into it, it was obviously there was nothing there. So she was cleared after 50 days, and we had to leave our home again. So we were displaced twice in a matter of a couple of years. And then we went to another neighborhood. And then at that time, after my mom and dad had been targeted, now it was my turn, because I was, I'm an atheist, and I was an atheist since I was in high school. So, and I'm a very outspoken person, so I like to speak my mind. And I used to criticize the society and things that's going on with our daily lives, and I didn't like what I was seeing, and basically I was harassed and threatened and bullied and beaten up, and at some point, like, strangers, like three people, or I think, I was walking with a friend in the evening, and they came to me and said, "We've heard you were the guy who was speaking about these things. Are you trying to spread like a new ideology, whatever? If you, we are gonna come to your school if we ever hear that you said something again." And so that made me just, uh, because I've seen people getting kidnapped. Like, I've been, like, someone was kidnapped in my school for being Shia. So I knew, for being an atheist, they would do worse to you, if they were serious. So I stopped going to school. And after just a couple of like a year or so, we just decided to leave the country because it wasn't like it was obviously not safe for us to be there, and we were waiting. We were hoping that things will get better, but unfortunately, it did not. It was getting worse, and after we left, 3 years later, ISIS came and took over of big parts of Iraq. So this is just a backstory of, like, when people hear that you're a refugee, unfortunately, a lot of people think that refugees are coming because they want to take jobs, or they you know they just want to come in um, and have better lives, and they could have stayed in their homes. But I just want everyone to understand that a lot of us had to. We were not giving the choice, and so this is where I grew up. But obviously, there is a lot much more to it than only what
Yeah.
I've said. I've also been lucky to have an educated mother and father who taught me, to be to critically think of things and not just accept anything that the society tells me. And so,
So
yeah.
yeah, so I had a, you said that you were a pretty outspoken atheist when you were in high school. Is it your parents, were they religious, or they were accepting of the way that you thought? Uh,
Yeah, so my father is an atheist, and my mom is a Muslim, but uh, she's a very moderate Muslim. She doesn't wear the scarf. My father used to drink every day. He she you know he used to drink every day, and she didn't have a problem with it. So that tells you a little bit about how
yeah.
she's like, and she's very accepting and tolerant of other people. But yeah, she's a journalist, so she's also had the chance to cover a lot of different stories and be critical also of the society. Um, so I was raised in a moderate household. Um, yeah,
So how did you? So now you're this, and around how old are you when you actually leave Iraq?
I
Your
left
family
Iraq.
actually.
I left Iraq when I was 19.
So you're 19, you leave, and then how did? So now what you're doing is you're running this organization, especially right now, that's helping LGBTQ activists. So sorry, people that are trapped in these countries and are kind of suffering in these countries. How did so how did you end up in that line of work? What was your journey going there? Did it start before you left Iraq, or did it start after, or was it
So
simultaneous?
so I was aware of LGBT issues when I was in Iraq, and I was defending LGBT issues. Like I spoke about it with classmates and with friends and with my family, to the point where twice, at least twice, my father thought I was gay because I was talking about the topic, and I had friends thinking I'm gay because I was speaking up about the topic. But I'm actually straight. And I'm not part of the LGBT community, but I just thought it's a human rights issue, and uh, and like I said, I was lucky because my parents kind of taught me not to take anything for granted before I think about it for myself. And so when I thought about this issue, I just felt like uh, I don't need to hate anyone just because of how they behave in their houses, and who they love and who they have sex with. I just didn't feel like that's something that offends me or bothers me, and so I was sympathetic to the cause since I was young, and I just didn't like the fact that people hated them, and part of the reason was, I think, because because the society also hated me and hated me, people like me, and I felt like I'm a victim of that attitude. So I could see that LGBT people were also victims of that attitude, and it's a whole general problem that we have in the Middle East. I think it's a big problem that I'm hoping and wanting to dedicate my whole life for, which is, the problem of not accepting the other. The problem of if someone is different than you, then somehow you have to hate them, or you have to hurt them, or you have to fight them and kill them. And unfortunately, this is still a reality as we speak in so many places in the Middle East, and so many people are suffering for it. Like, people are in pain and depression, and people are threatened and hunted down and killed. I get stories all the time from the Middle East of people asking for help. So unfortunately, this is the situation. I'm just not one who wants to just sit on the sidelines and watch all and know that all the things are happening and not do anything about it. I think, as people, especially as people from the Middle East, as ex-Muslims, or as, let's say, liberal, moderate people, we have a duty to do something about it and not just sit in and watch.
Yeah, this is like a really great example, I think, for people here in the West as well, that there is this, like, you're not a member of the community itself, but you are advocating for it because there is a principle. There's a principle that this sort of this otherization that people do. Somebody's different, then they must be ostracized, or even if you don't care that they're different, but you just don't get involved because they're not. It's not your issue. It's not something that has to do with you. Well, how they say, first they're going to come for them, and then they're going to come for you. Everybody's in it together. So you do advocate for people, even if you're not with them. They are, and this is one of the problems, I think, with a lot of the dialogue here in the West, is people tend to think that, if you're not part of something, you can't speak up on behalf of them, or you can't comment on it. But I think you're a living example of why that couldn't be further from the truth. So you are the actual definition of an ally. I mean, beyond just tweeting hashtags. I mean, you're actually going out and you're doing the work. So you have, and I'm actually really interested in this. Is it De-Authorizing Dialogue? That organization, because I agree that this is a big problem. People who grow up and who are a little bit different. Like, people don't realize here especially in the West, when you see images of people from the Middle East, or images from people from South Asia, or Muslims in general, all the women are wearing hijab, all the men have beards. You usually show them praying or doing something like that, but like as if they're defined by the religion, but they're not. There's so much diversity. There's 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. There's so much diversity. There's secular people. There are, LGBT people. There are feminists. There are, people who they're non-believers. There's religious minorities. There's all kinds of different ethnicities and different races. And it's just a wonderful thing to be able to stand up not only for your own, but also, for others who you feel that you have some parallels with.
Yeah, and let me say, like, I really appreciate the fact that, as an outspoken activist, you are your voice is very important, because you are an ex-Muslim, but you differentiate between the ideas and the people. And so, for me, it's like, as an ex-Muslim or atheist, I despise these ideas, but that doesn't mean I have to despise the people, because I believe that we're all products of our environments. And so
That's right.
people who are born in Saudi Arabia, they would behave differently if they grew up in India or Brazil. And so it was just a chance that they were born in a place, and so they grew up in an environment that tells them that this is what's right, this is what's wrong, and this is what you have to do, and this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
And so we can disagree with the ideas, and we can fight, not just disagree. We can, like, for me, I'm trying to fight against any fundamentalist ideology, but not demonize the people. And this is an issue that I see all over the world, like even in the US, where you have left and right, and people are demonizing each other and hating each other, and deleting people off Facebook, and not talking to their relatives and family members just because they vote differently. And I'm like, no, like this is, you're not doing anything for your cause if you're not talking to the to those people, you know. Like
Yeah.
I talk to even many, I have many people who disagree with me on so many fundamental things, but they are good people. And
Yeah.
so so the idea of the De-Authorized project is that we want to show that basically the the essence of us as human beings, we share so much, we have so many things in common than the things that separates us.
That's right.
And and let me tell you like a short story on how I became to, you know, learn this is when I was as a kid, you know, as a 14 even 13, 15-year old kid. My first interaction with the real other, you know, like the Western person, which back at the time in Iraq, we didn't have Western people, you know, in the city. And my first real interaction was with American soldiers. And I used to basically watch movies and know some English. So I would go, and as Iraqis, we are very hospitable people. So not just me, but everyone in the neighborhood would go to these American soldiers, even when they're wearing their guns and their sunglasses and their, you know, they look very different. But we would go there and shake their hands. We would play football with them. We would take pictures with them. And then a couple of years after, when I was a bit older and I spoke English, I still saw American soldiers walking in front of my school and in front of my house. And I would just go shake their hands and introduce myself, and we would have like long conversations about movies and TV shows and politics and sports. And what I have realized is I've had like a stereotype about soldiers, because, you know, in Iraq, we have stereotypes about soldiers, that they're ignorant, they're impolite, they are rude, they're not going to talk to you. But what I found out is when I actually went and spoke to those soldiers, they were actually friendly, nice, open-minded. They they were actually good guys. And some people, you know, still get surprised when I say that, because they would think, you know, I'm from Iraq, so that means I have to hate American soldiers. But I can disagree with the government and dislike the politicians and blame them for what happened. But I differentiate between the soldiers who grew up in a place and they were just 18 and they thought they were, you know, defending their country or protecting something. But when I actually talked to them, they were not bad people. And so this, if I could connect, if an Iraqi kid can connect with an American soldier who's holding a gun, I think any two people could connect and talk and be friends.
Yeah,
And
that's we are complicated. Like human beings are not simple. Everybody, we're a lot more than our beliefs. And you're right. Like if there's some 17 or 18-year-old kid in the U.S. and then they join the military because, you know, they want to. They come from a poor family. They want to kind of, you know, they're being manipulated, obviously, you know, by the government, because they're offered like a life of prestige, a life of honor. You know, they are given university educations. They get a lot of sort of the financial benefits for their family, all kinds of things. There's a lot of kids that go for it, and then they go to places like Iraq, and you know, yes, there are bad stories. There's the stuff that you hear about Abu
yes,
Ghraib and everything, and those are
yes,
horrendous. But most of them are just like kids like you. So you know, when you talk to them, they're still into music, they're still into girls, they're still into like the, you know,
exactly.
music or whatever it is. And it's the same thing in my like in my book. I wrote in the first chapter about when I was growing up in Saudi Arabia, and exactly what you're saying in that environment, the kind of things that they have in the textbooks, even for first graders in Saudi Arabia, about the infidels and how you should not be friends with non-Muslims and the Jews, and you know, all of these things they have, and they're indoctrinated from the first grade all the way into high school. I didn't even go to those schools, but when I first met somebody from Israel, when I first came to Canada, and I'd never met anybody, I actually had I wrote about it in the book that I actually had a physical reaction to it, because even for me as an expat in the US, I was so heavily indoctrinated. So when something like 9/11 happened, I didn't find it shocking at all. And I also don't think, I mean, this is why I'm so big on not demonizing people, is because I think that the way people are raised, if any of us were raised with those books and we were indoctrinated with these things from a very early age, you don't know what we'd be like. How can we righteously say that we would be better people? We don't know, like those environments and this kind of manipulation from it's very, very powerful, right? So yeah,
Absolutely.
so completely agree with you. Yeah.
And Saudi Arabia is a one of a kind of a extreme example in the Middle East. Unfortunately, that exists, but also just want to point out that in Iraq, we despise terrorists because we 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 love life. People love to celebrate. People love to go like meet girls and drink, and even the ones who do not drink or like who are a bit conservative, they would still like people in Iraq. We look at ISIS as a extreme minority that's just criminal organization, and people. Most people are peaceful. If you go to Iraq and walk in the streets, a lot of people will invite you to their houses and want to, you know, buy you some food or introduce you to their culture. So yeah, I think any person would be surprised of whenever you travel, you would find that we have so much in common than we realize.
Yeah, ultimately, when people want to, it's the same thing. You're talking about here in the West. You've got the liberals and the conservatives, and the left and the right. They're all just like picking at each other, and I do that a lot too. Like I have certain opinions about the conservative right, the current right in the U.S. with the whole Trumpian thing. But at the same time, my own brother, who I see like pretty much, I saw him earlier today, right? And my own brother is a conservative. He votes conservative here. We always have these discussions about, he thought that, Trump's, a lot of his policies, economic policies were great. Ultimately he lost his support for Trump. Like he didn't really support him that much at the end, but he has been consistently conservative. And these are people that are in my family. They know exactly what I think about things. I have people who are religious Muslims in my family completely disagree with everything I say. And I can be as vocal about it as I want. I can be satirical. I can mock it. I can do all of that. But ultimately, when you get together, people are just a lot more. Human beings are a lot more in their beliefs. And I think that all three of your projects that you have going on that we talked about, I think that, it seems like we share that sort of principle, and that's kind of driving your work as well and what you do. Whether
Absolutely.
it's like with refugees or with the LGBTQ people, or with people who are different, the de-authorization. So I wanted to, like, now that we have, like, this was just fantastic. I wish I could talk to you about this the whole time, but because there's so much to cover. Maybe one day, some other time, we'll come back and we will. But I really want to get into some of your insights and some of the work that you've done with the LGBTQ community in different countries in the Middle East and in North Africa. So when you first started this, how did you actually reach out to them and find these people? And what has your experience been like, say, in like different countries in the Middle East and North Africa, in terms of how these communities exist? And because some of the governments are more repressive, others are not as repressive. And their dynamics with the family, their dynamics with the society. So what has your experience generally been like?
Yeah, so I first started to I was working in a NGO, that I was a caseworker. So that NGO was supporting refugee families by connecting them to sponsors in the West, and we had so many people from the West who were trying to support those families here in Turkey and Jordan and Greece. So I was a caseworker, and one of our sponsors was a gay man from California, and he asked us, "What would you want to do? Is there anything that you're doing for the LGBT refugee community?" And we were like, "No, we're not doing something specifically for them. We support refugees in general." And so he came in with the idea that we let's start a project, a shelter, where we give free housing for LGBT refugees. And so we were excited, me and a colleague, and we thought this is a great idea. Let's do this. And so we set up a fundraiser on the website of that NGO, and we raised some donations, and we looked for a building, and there we go. You have a shelter, the first LGBTQ refugee shelter in the country, and I was just wanted to be involved in any way I can. So I was a volunteer, and helped set up the building and helped interview people come in, and then I started working as a community outreach person. And 2 months later, there was a crackdown from the Turkish government on NGOs, specifically Western NGOs that they didn't like. So a lot of NGOs were shut down, and people were arrested and deported. So our manager at the time was afraid, and so he just wanted to leave, and then he left. And so they offered me to be the manager of the position of the manager in the shelter, and I took it, knowing the risks at the time, and it went from a registered shelter to non-registered, because we thought if we are non-registered, it would be safer for us to stay off the grid. And I did that for 2 years, but it was the most interesting and the most difficult 2 years of my life. All these years I thought I was a victim, as someone who grew up in war, as a refugee. I had a lot of racism and discrimination, and the system here doesn't really support you if you're a refugee. You're not actually allowed to work. You're not allowed to travel freely. You're supposed to stay in one city, and if you want to travel, you have to take a permission from the police. And so my life as a refugee for the first 5 years, from 2011 to 2015, was difficult, and I thought of that I'm a victim of this of the war, basically. But when I started working with LGBT refugees, I started realizing how much privilege I have, as someone who's straight. Who my family loves me, and I have no problem with having a girlfriend and telling my friends and about my love life and everything. Those people were unfortunately hunted down by their own families, their own neighbors, their own brothers and sisters, and from the community, as well. This is before the government, and so the government also, of course, adds a lot of makes everything worse, because especially you have in places like Syria, and we have Morocco, Iran. The government, people from our community had issues with the government, but most of the people that fled had problems with their own families or with their own communities, and that makes them very vulnerable psychologically, physically. They're also vulnerable legally in the country because they're refugees, and so you end up with they have very problematic experiences. And so the idea of the shelter was to create a safe place for them, where they can be themselves, where they can exist with other people like them who accept them for who they are. And we provided free housing, free food, and language classes. And so I managed that shelter for 2 years. We had a few police visits, which made us very nervous and which made the organization nervous. So the shelter had to close down in 2019. But as a person who was involved on a daily basis with the community, I was getting phone calls and messages almost on a daily basis of people who needed help. And so I started supporting them as an activist, as an individual. I started fundraising money and supporting the community. But then the needs kept happening and didn't stop. So I thought,
Of course.
I need to start something bigger than just me. And so I founded the Amman Project, which was a continuation of the mission of the shelter. So right now, while we don't have a physical shelter, we do provide emergency support for rent. Though this is mostly for people who, let's say, their families, they live with their families, and then they found out about their sexual orientation or gender identity, so they kick them out, or they have to flee, or their flatmates discover who they are, so they have to flee, and sometimes a lot of times they end up homeless. uh, so we basically support them with emergency rent support. We support them with food and other uh, emergencies like medical and other things. So we've been doing that for the last 2 years. Overall, it's been 4 years, and we've supported hundreds of LGBTQ refugees, mostly from Syria, Iraq, Iran, and Afghanistan. But we also have people from North Africa, Palestine, Yemen, uh, Pakistan, and at the same time, I'm working on a documentary project. Basically, I started filming interviews with people in the LGBT community. Mostly I wanted to do it in Arabic because I wanted to target the Arabic speaking audience,
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
to raise awareness about who are these people, why are they, you know uh, having these problems, what are they struggling with. And I do believe that there's a lot of people who are fair-minded, who are open-minded and liberal, still in the Middle East, who are still very homophobic, because the like we said, we're all products of our environment. So
Yeah.
the environment is inherently homophobic and sexist and transphobic. So when a lot of people, even if they're educated and liberal and fair and good people, they end up having these homophobic attitudes that leads to all these bad things that I spoke about. So the idea was to, since we're in the age of social media, to start having these conversations, to start, making documentaries and start educating people about this issue.
Yeah. This is, I think, humanizing people is a really, really big thing. I mean, the whole come out movement in the LGBT community. That, I mean, if you look at LGBT rights here, in the like in the U.S. and in Canada, Canada was actually even earlier, is it's when people started seeing that, when they thought of homosexuals, they just thought of this sort of term, this descriptive kind of person that does this one thing, and that's all they thought of. But then when people started coming out, they're like, oh, my coworker is that, my son is gay, my nephew is gay, my relative overseas is gay. And then these are people that they know, and when they're people that they know and you humanize them, I think that is one of the things that was most powerful. Then, over here you had TV shows like Will and Grace, and you had, movies like
Yeah,
Philadelphia, and all of those things are, they actually connect with you. When people connect with it emotionally as human beings, that's very powerful. We actually had Susanna, and I just did our last episode. We were talking about the importance of storytelling, personal storytelling, and emotionally
exactly.
appealing to people. Um, so, you this idea, I think it's a really good idea to actually do interviews with these people,
Yes,
and show their faces, show their what they feel like, what their lives are like. Like, wow, they're the same kinds of people who just want to feel safe. They want to make sure they have enough resources. They want to just make sure their families are safe. They want to go to school. They want to get educated. It's exactly the same as anybody else. You know. So
absolutely. And so if you it, this if you think about this issue, it's not just it's more than uh, about LGBTQ rights. It's really it's human rights in general, but also it's we the way I see it is that we are fighting an ideology that says you cannot be this, that, and this, and you have to do this and that. And so I see myself as fighting the fundamentalists with, but by bringing different ideas and by bringing, by showing why this set of ideas is wrong and why people should think differently about it. And so when you have someone who's gonna become more understanding and tolerant of LGBTQ issues, that means they're also going to be uh, reflecting and thinking about other issues like women's rights, minority rights, like people might even question their whole belief system and start to question religion and start to question our laws and why do we do this and why do we do that, and so it is a it is a battle of ideas, and one of the ways we can defeat those fundamentalist ideas is by promoting the type of ideas we're talking about.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, right. I completely agree with you. So there's when you have in these different countries. So you've talked about the refugees that have come to where you are and how you've been able to help them. They're from all kinds of different countries. That the outreach that you're doing to people who are within these countries. How are you able to manage? I know there's probably some details of this you can't go into, and that I completely understand, and I think the audience understands as well. So, we're not going to press you to go into that. But actually, to reach out to people who are within these countries, like right now, working with people in Afghanistan and other areas. I mean, you're focused on Afghanistan right now, right?
Yes. So right now, we've worked with LGBTQ people from Afghanistan over the years. Uh, a lot of them are transgender people who just cannot exist in Afghanistan, and they were beaten and raped, and so they end up coming here, sometimes at a really young age, like even before 18. They come like I've seen minors, people who are 16 and 17, who end up here because they just couldn't survive being there anymore. So as soon as they become a little bit older, like older enough to travel, they do it, even if they're not legally allowed to travel. And so I've known about this struggle for a while, but now it is on a different, a completely different level. Even with the previous government, uh, LGBT people still met and had underground meetings and events and parties, and they were active on some, like on social media and dating. They had like underground dating apps where they could exist and you know um, have relationships. But right now everyone,
This is in Afghanistan.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, no, and it happens like in Egypt, and this is happening in many countries in the Middle East.
Yeah. In
They,
Pakistan, I know they also
yes,
had
yes,
these things.
yes. It's just an underground scene that's hidden from the public. But now they're so scared that they just cannot do anything. I talked to people who are hiding in places, not going out. They are leaving their homes and started to like hide in a basement of some building because they know that some people knew something about them was suspicious. So now they're afraid that anyone could say anything to the Taliban, and they could end up getting caught and killed. And so,
Yeah.
I've had a person calling me over and over, telling me that this is in the beginning, when a few weeks ago, when the Taliban started to take control, and they were searching house to house, and he was so afraid that he's gonna get caught any minute that he was crying and telling me that he just wants to go on the roof and throw himself and kill himself because he wanted, for him, he's not afraid of the idea of dying. He's afraid of the idea of getting caught by the Taliban, tortured, beaten, and then killed in such a horrible way that he's made that they make an example of him in front of
Yeah.
the public.
And
And the
just
Taliban,
to,
yeah,
sorry, I was going to interrupt you just for a second to tell the audience that, this is just for context. It's in July, there was the Taliban judge, so in the judicial system there, he said that there are two punishments that they have for homosexuality in Afghanistan. One is stoning them to death, and number two is being crushed under a toppled wall. So this is what they're facing. So, and this is also, I guess, a message for people. A lot of times in the West here, you have this discussion about whether it's a choice that people choose to be gay, people choose that they want to change their gender identity, and if you listen to this, the kind of things that they're facing, these are people living under the Taliban, right? And you said some of them are even younger than the age of 18. Okay, and
yeah,
they are this way. Why would anybody choose to do that when they're at risk of being tortured and thrown off buildings and toppled under the walls? Like, that is just something for people everywhere to think about. When they think of this rhetoric and they don't understand what's going on with them. And that these are not people who would choose to do that at such great risk.
absolutely. And the issues for the community is that they are fighting on different fronts. So first you have their families, who if they found about them, it depends on how extreme the family is and how stable the family is. So it could go from they kicking them out of the house, not talking to them again, disowning them basically, or it could be worse, and be like beating and or killing even. Then you have the society, who oftentimes, when you have unfortunately, when you have a sexually suppressed society, where you don't get to talk to women easily, or have relationships, then you have a lot of guys who are just basically horny and aggressive and homophobic. And then when you combine that with homophobia and hate, then what ends up happening is these people, they get caught, they're beaten and raped. And this had happened to several of the people that right now I'm working with. I know of a story of two people who were in a hotel, and somehow someone in the hotel found out that they were gay, and they were basically there to sleep with each other. So he told he called the police, and the police people showed up in a car. They took them to the police station, and they were raped for hours by policemen. And then they were let go, and they couldn't even say anything because they don't want anyone to know about what happened. And I had people who were raped by their neighbor or by someone uh, in school, just because they were feminine. And they somehow they extort them. They say, okay, if you don't do this, we're gonna tell people who you are. And so they are physically and psychologically abused even before the Taliban. And so
Yeah.
when you put the Taliban into the equation, now it's not just about beating and rape that existed already, but now it literally comes down. It's you either live or die, and any minute you could get caught and be killed.
Yeah, that's incredible that they, and I always wondered about this, is that, when they find out that there is a man who's gay, they punish him by raping him, like other men raping him, like, and they are, and the whole problem they have is the fact that he's gay, and then they're doing this to them. It's just, it's such a strange, ridiculous way of, just this idea of like punishing people by doing the exact same thing that you hate them for. Just doesn't make any sense. We're going to, I know we have about 10 minutes left. I wish I could talk to you for hours, but we are going to talk about, we're going to give out the links of, what you do. We're going to talk about the organizations over here at the end, but we do have some questions from our patrons that I'd like to direct to you. So you're good with that for a little bit?
Sure.
Okay, so the first one is from our Patreon page. So again, wanted to let everybody know that if you can't join these live streams, I know a lot of you can't because of time zones and everything, you can post your question under the link to the stream on the Patreon page, and it's for the Patreon link. And we will read those questions first, and we're going to give them priority. So the first question today is from Tobias Meyer, and he's got a comment and a question. So he's saying, with digital platforms making the world more small and cohesive, there are many more opportunities to reach out, share experiences and information, and build communities across borders. I love how you guys have been leading the train on that. With that, we also get more opportunities to support and help persecuted minority groups and individuals out, showing solidarity towards minorities that earlier stayed forgotten, and get their stories out there for the world to see. On the other hand, there now is a lot of information and even other campaigns to compete with for care and attention. So with already so many campaigns out there, how do you best navigate to highlight a problem or case that needs attention and make such cases stick out and generate enough support? So how do you make your work, what you're doing, stand out from all the rest when you're sort of, in a way, I guess he's saying you're kind of competing for donations, competing for support with so many other organizations and projects that are doing it. So how do you go out and actually make your space among those?
Well, just basically by telling stories of people and saying the truth, which is that the LGBT community is probably the most vulnerable community in the Middle East. If you're a woman in, let's say, in Afghanistan right now, you can avoid getting punished or killed by wearing the right clothes or by behaving in a certain way and by just basically staying in the house. So you can change something, but for gay people, they cannot change who they are. They cannot change their feminine attributes, or the fact that they have been known in this community, and probably people know something about them or about their reputation that now it can turn any minute can turn against them, and they might face death. And so that's why people are in hiding and they're not leaving their homes. And so the work we're doing right now, the reason why we're working now with Vice News, and we're talking with CBS News, and we just did a story with CNN. And the reason why these media outlets are focusing on this is because the struggle of the LGBT community right now is probably the most difficult struggle at the moment in the media, but also in real life. And those people are just basically facing death simply because of who they are. And so a lot of people and we understand how sensitive this topic is, and we want to reach out to more people and talk more about this issue, so that more people understand and more people hopefully start to get involved and to support this community.
Yeah, that's great. So Bulbul is asking, do you see a shift in attitudes in the young people in Islamic countries with respect to homosexuality? I mean, I know that you've talked about how there has been, we both know this, and we both grew up there, that there's a tremendous amount of homophobia there. It still exists, but has there among the young people, actually, I'll take it to add to this question, We had Steven Pinker a couple of years ago on the podcast when he put out Enlightenment Now, the book, and he mentioned something that's interesting. He said that a kid from, or a young person from a Muslim majority country today is less homophobic than a young person from Norway in the 1950s. Saying so. So that's obviously it's not a real comparison exactly, because I mean everybody was homophobic, as little as 40 years ago. But have you noticed a change among the young people who are on social media who are against most of these things?
Yeah, honestly, I do, and that's the good news, is that I am noticing that that this topic is being talked about more generally, whether it's on social media, whether it's on the traditional media in the Middle East. This topic has been more talked about and more discussed, and I'm seeing in real life, I'm seeing young people who are approaching us and telling us that they want to volunteer. So now, the Amman Project has over 40, 50 volunteers in total. And so
wow.
we have volunteers from Syria, from Iraq, from Egypt, and it's really encouraging to see a lot of people also who come. Sometimes we have fundraisers and people come, or just people who I talk to in normal life. They tell me that they support what I'm doing, and some of those folks are from the Middle East, and a lot of them are not LGBT people themselves. They are straight, but they are more understanding. I was just talking to a girl from Yemen 2 days ago, and we were having shisha and talking about, and she's a Muslim, and she was telling me how she defends LGBT people in conversations, and that she supports what we're doing, and she supports the LGBT community. So I'm seeing some change. Obviously, not a huge change, but this is the nature. I keep telling our volunteers, sometimes when people get discouraged by a homophobic attack or news, I tell them change takes time. Our journey is not just for 2-3 years. It's over the 50 years. So change is going to happen, but it's going to happen slow. And we need to. It can only change if we do something about it. If we work for it.
Yeah. So Bobo has a follow-up question. She's saying, do you think that Western countries are doing enough through their refugee programs to help LGBTQ persons in Islamic countries?
That's a really good question, actually. No, I don't think they are. So unfortunately, a lot of the people in the community right now are waiting, and they're waiting for years, and including people, LGBTQ people from Iran, Afghanistan, and Iraq. These countries, for obvious reasons, the political scene is not stable. They have seen wars in the last 20 years, and still it takes years to process them. Even trans women, But for Syrian, when it comes to the Syrian LGBT community, they are processed faster. For European countries, we had people like go in. Sometimes it takes 6 months, or it can take a year or two. But they end up going faster than others who are non-Syrians, and I don't see the logic behind that, because LGBT people are fleeing from violence and fleeing from their society. It's not simply that they're fleeing from war, but even so, when you have people fleeing from war like Iraq and Afghanistan, they're still not processed fast enough, and there's not much support for them.
Yeah, that's like I agree. I've kind of seen that as well here, and I wish that it wasn't that way. We have two questions. Dee Boudreau is asking a question that topic that you're asking about, Dee, is about related to this big illness that's going around. is not something we can actually talk about, because YouTube, even if you mention it, they tend to strike down. It's a really hard thing. You can't. I know, it's crazy, but they just have these rules. So we've decided not to kind of go there. But I have a question from Music Guy 20. How do you help people flee their countries when you have barriers like visas? Do refugees or asylum seekers need these documents if fleeing to a Western country via plane or on foot? And I guess this question is one thing that I don't know how much detail you can get into this. If you can't, that's fine. But yeah, it's a good question. Like, what does your organization do to help with some of these barriers?
So right now, we are involved since the fall of Kabul, and even before that, we started for 3 months now. We've been supporting the LGBT community in Afghanistan, and also helping them get out. And so far, we managed to support and help 16 people get out of the country. And this is not easy. This is a process, but we are in contact with more people, tens of people in Afghanistan, and
Wow.
we are working with them, and we're going to be working with them, I imagine, for the next years, for the coming years. So if you want to support, we obviously, like, I cannot get into details of how we're doing it, and whether it takes visas or not, or papers, but what I can tell you is that we are in contact with international activists and organizations that are working with us, and we are providing the lists of people, and we are communicating directly with people inside the country. So if you want to support this vulnerable group at this very difficult time, just check the Amman Project, and email us if you want to get involved.
Right. So yeah, thank you very much. I mean, we're at time. I want to close by talking about the work that you're doing, where people can find you. So first of all, you yourself, if people want to get in touch with you or reach out to you, are you online? Do you have like a Twitter, Instagram, and everything that you can send us so that people can follow you?
Yes. So my name is Aws Jubair, AWSJUBAIR, and you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You could also email me. I can send you my email, Ali, if you would like to share it.
Sure.
And you can find the Amman Project on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Also, we have a fundraiser now that's going on, which is really important. If you can share it, donate, if you can throw out a fundraiser dinner or something to help us out. All this money that we're now raising goes directly to the LGBTQ community in Afghanistan.
Yeah, and I'm gonna actually show the screen for the fundraiser. Well, at least I'll try to. It doesn't seem like it's working for some reason. Okay, yeah, it's not going to work. Yeah, for some reason it's not working. But anyway, so the fundraiser, that it's on justgiving.com. So it's justgiving.com/crowdfunding/Amman-project-LGBTQ. Okay, and this link will be posted under this, so whether you're watching this or listening to this on YouTube, or whether you're listening to it on your podcast app, you will see this in the description. We're also posting the link for the CNN article right now, which mentioned the Amman Project and mentioned Aws Jubair by name, and covered some of the work they're doing, and covered some of the situations that the LGBTQ plus people in Afghanistan are going through. So that link is also included underneath here, and as well as the website for the Amman Project. So this has been fascinating, and it's been really impressive. Like, you are, I think a lot of people would agree, who are listening to this, that you are definitely, your work is absolutely heroic. It's brave, it's courageous. It's the kind of thing that I don't think a lot of us kind of talk about these things and we discuss them a lot, but to actually go out and do these things and fundraise. And you guys have been doing, it seems like you're doing fairly well with the fundraising. And I think that hopefully, once we get this out there, you'll do even better. So yeah, thank you for your work.
I hope so. Thank you so much, Ali, for giving me this opportunity. I'm also very glad that I finally got to meet you and talk to you. I'm actually trying to come to you to Toronto, to Canada. I'm applying for a Canadian program, so I'm looking right now at sponsors actually. So if
Right.
people want to support me, they can sponsor me and help me come to Canada. And there, I'm hoping to continue my work as a human rights activist and do more work in the Middle East. So thank
Right.
you,
So
Ali.
yeah, and for like I already told Alice that I'll be one of the sponsors. I know that you've got maybe you have a couple more, and I usually need around 5 sponsors to get Alice to here. I mean, Canada would be a much better place with you here and your organization here. So yeah, if there's anybody out there who's interested in sponsoring Alice and his work and having him come to Canada with people in Canada, please let me know. Otherwise, I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think we're going to be able to find you all the sponsors and get you here. And I'm very excited about the fact that you can come here. I think that you will get a lot of latitude and a lot of space to be able to do your work, and also a lot of appreciation and attention for it too. And then there'll be a lot of people here who will support the cause. And just the fact that you're highlighting the LGBTQ cause in some of these oppressed countries. I find it really one thing I was going to say is that there's a crossroads with some of the people here who are some of the sort of far leftists here who tend to have to choose between, and we didn't really get into this so much in this conversation. They sometimes think they have many sort of much of the Muslim community that's coming out and protesting against teaching their kids in schools about the LGBTQ community, and then people have to choose. They're like, well, we don't want to be Islamophobic and disregard their feelings, but then we also don't want to be homophobic and abandon our LGBTQ community. So it's a very interesting crossroads for them to be at, because they have to choose which they're going to take. And I think that's also another really it's this issue, like being at the forefront, really helps with a lot of introspection in terms of what people are going to support.
Yeah, uh, I'm gonna try to quote Bill Maher here, but you can be being liberal is about tolerance, but you don't have to tolerate the intolerance. So
Yes,
we don't have to tolerate these ideas. We want to tolerate the people as human beings, but we still have to speak up against these ideas. And the fact that you're criticizing these ideas does not mean that you are uh, being hateful. It's just that we have to stand up for human rights regardless. Uh, and so the best way to do that is to support those from the Muslim community themselves who are fighting against the voices uh, of our conservatives, our
exactly.
extremists. So we're trying to, the way I see it is that we are the, the name of your show describes it perfectly. We are secular jihadists, so we're fighting
Yeah.
those, but in peaceful way, of course. And so, if you want to support human rights, basically just support those voices in the Middle East.
Yeah, and you are and people here, they are products of the Enlightenment. I mean, you had a really repressive, horrendous time in Christian Europe that you escaped from a couple of hundred years ago, and then all of these principles that you have of liberalism, of secularism, of diversity and equality, all of these freedom, and all of these things came from that. And now this is the Enlightenment. This is the Enlightenment happening now in the Muslim world, right, in the Arab world, and so this is something that it would be strange to be a beneficiary of that when it was sort of white Europeans, but when it comes to the Muslim world now, we're saying that it's Islamophobic or it doesn't make any sense. So, this is if you support Enlightenment values, this is something you should get behind. I mean, these people like House, people like the people that he's working with. I mean, these are our counterparts, right? Who want that kind of freedom and enlightenment. So, anyway, House, thank you very much. Music Guy is saying thank you for coming on the show. D is saying thank you. What a great human. I completely agree with her. So thank you, D. And super appreciate it. Everybody who's listening to this, please, if you're on YouTube, please like the video, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell so you can be notified for whenever we do more videos and interviews like this. And do consider going to patreon.com/sjme and becoming a patron. You can do that for as little as $1 a month, and you'll get to see all of these live streams on video. You'll get to watch them, and then you also get to take part in the conversation and ask questions like some of the patrons did today. And if you can't join the live stream as a patron, you can also post your questions in the on the Patreon page, as I mentioned, and you will be able to, and we will prioritize those questions and ask them first. So anyway, thank you very much. Thank you, Aus. Thank you, audience. Thank you, patrons, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ali.
Yeah. Wait.
The Secular Jihadists have been made possible thanks to the Illuminati and the covert support of Israel and the CIA. That's what we have been told, but we haven't received our checks yet. If you like what we do, please support us. Share the podcast with your friends. Write and tweet us with topic and guest suggestions. Or head over to secularjihadists.com and give $1 or more for exclusive access to live video. Have your questions read and answered on the air, and more. Till next time, may the flying spaghetti monster be with you.